Some stories don't start with shouting. Mine began the night my own son stood in my kitchen eyes, cold, demanding access to money that wasn't his. No shame, no hesitation, just entitlement sharp enough to slice through whatever was left between us. That moment told me something had gone terribly wrong, long before I noticed the damage. And if you've lived through anything like this, tell your story in the comments. I'd covered Darren's major expenses for years: tuition gaps, car repairs, overdue bills. None of it hit me the way that winter evening did. He stood in my small Selwood living room, both hands on his phone. "Dad, don't get me anything for Christmas," he said. "I don't need it." The tone wasn't casual. It was clipped, guarded, a dismissal dressed up as independence. Something tightened under my ribs. "You sure?" I asked. He nodded without looking up. "Yeah, I'm good." My phone buzzed at the same time, an alert from the bank. A pending charge I didn't recognize. A couple $100 unfamiliar vendor. I didn't say anything. Old habits kicked in. Let it slide. Don't accuse. Don't spark another fight. "You heading out?" I asked. He flinched at the question. "Got stuff to do." The call on his phone lit up again. He declined it fast. "Everything all right?" I tried. "Yeah, Dad. Just don't worry about it." His jaw tightened. "You always worry too much." He slipped out the door before I could ask more. Later that night, lying awake, the old memories started pressing in, years of raising him alone. The late dinners, his silence behind a closed bedroom door. The compromises I made so he wouldn't pull further away. I'd spent half my life treating guilt like a form of parenting. The next morning, the feeling still sat there, unmovable. In the garage, my laptop finally loaded the banking page. A line of transactions I didn't recognize flickered up. My breath hitched. I closed the window before reading further. Something in me wasn't ready yet. Back in the kitchen, I kept myself busy washing dishes, straightening mail, avoiding questions my mind already knew the answers to. The front door opened. Darren stepped in wearing the same strained expression he'd left with. He tossed his keys onto the table. "You're up early," he said, tone flat. "Checking a few things," I replied. He hesitated, eyes flicking to my phone on the counter. "You didn't look at anything weird, did you?" "Should I have?" I asked. His throat bobbed. "No, I just never mind." He moved around the kitchen with that clipped, restless energy of someone afraid the truth might surface before they can redirect it. "Darren," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Talk to me." He stopped, but only for a second. "Dad, don't start. Please. Not today." The tension from yesterday hadn't disappeared. It had rooted itself deeper. And for the first time, I didn't smooth it over. I just watched him seeing clearly what I'd been trying not to admit. Whatever was happening wasn't new. It had simply waited for me to stop looking away. The next afternoon at Safeway, I saw Darren in the electronics aisle. His basket was stacked with things he'd never mentioned, needing a wireless speaker gift cards, grooming kits that didn't match his budget. Before I could call his name, he stepped into the checkout line and pulled out a card. My card. He tapped it, expression blank, posture steady, like using my bank account wasn't unusual at all. "Darren," I said from a few feet away. He didn't flinch, didn't turn, just grabbed the bag and walked out, fast, shoulders rigid, as if the only way to avoid a conversation was to outrun it. At my register, the clerk scanned my groceries and smiled. "You still racking up those bonus points from all the big purchases?" The words hit like a slap. Big purchases. Points. A version of me I didn't recognize was circulating out there, and I hadn't said a thing to shape it. I forced a polite reply and left. In the parking lot, my phone buzzed, "Transaction pending approval." The number glared up at me. My thumb hovered. Then I locked the screen. "Not here." not surrounded by people who expected nothing from me except a nod and a receipt. The next day at work, my manager stopped me after a briefing. "How's that equipment package you ordered?" "The one on your card. I didn't order anything I said." He laughed lightly. "You're funny." I walked away before the panic showed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. The signs aligned too cleanly. My name was backing purchases I'd never seen. People assumed I was spending freely while Darren treated my finances like an extension of his own. By midday, I drove to the clinic. Needed a moment of clarity. Marla was updating files behind the desk. She looked up, brow creasing. "You're carrying something that isn't yours," she said softly. "Be careful with that. No judgment, no pressure, just truth spoken plainly." The appointment blurred by. On the drive home, the silence inside the cabin didn't soothe. It pressed in thick with the weight of everything unsaid. Darren wasn't acting out of stress. He was acting out of certainty I wouldn't stop him. When I stepped inside the house, something felt off, not colder, just unfamiliar. My keys hit the counter with a flat sound. Mail sat in a crooked pile. One envelope from the bank watched me like a dare. I didn't open it. Darren appeared in the hallway moments later. No greeting, no pause. He moved past me with irritation thick in his stride, as if my presence had become an inconvenience. His door slammed. "Darren," I called out. No answer. "Talk to me." I tried again. Silence. The slam lingered in the air long after he disappeared behind the wall. Not loud, but final. A boundary he redrew without hesitation. I stood there in the walkway, absorbing what should have been obvious sooner. This shift wasn't sudden. It had been wearing down for years, erosion hidden beneath the everyday excuses I built to protect whatever bond we had left. A car passed outside, rattling the window, just enough to pull me back into motion. I reached for the envelope again, fingers brushing the edge before pulling back. Not yet. Not while the truth still tangled itself. In the kitchen, I filled a glass with water. The faucet hissed, the light buzzed. The simple sounds didn't steady anything. The image kept replaying Darren tapping my card without hesitation. No guilt, no fear, no recognition that what he'd done was wrong. "God," I whispered, leaning on the counter. What did I let this become? The knot in my stomach tightened. Whatever came next wouldn't be simple, but one thing was clear now. The line between us wasn't bending anymore. It was about to break. The garage felt colder than usual when I opened the laptop. The banking page loaded and the charges stacked into a pattern I could no longer rationalize. Electronics. I'd never heard of boutique clothing home decor that didn't belong to my life. Then a deposit into a financial service under my name, one I had never used. I clicked into older statements. More of the same. Not survival, not mistakes. Choices made with money that wasn't his. My foot tapped against the concrete. The small part of me that kept defending Darren shrank with every scroll. At work, Sean stopped by my desk. "Heard you're fixing up Darren's place," he said, grinning. "You're a good dad." I froze. What place? Sean laughed. "The upgrades, the furniture. He said you covered it. Must have cost a bit." The air thinned. I nodded just enough to get him to walk away. During lunch, my phone buzzed. "Thanks for helping Darren. He says you've been covering things so he can breathe." A stranger, a narrative I had never written. When I got home, Darren was on the couch with two friends. Their voices dipped when I walked in. One of them muttered, "He said the money's handled." Darren waved him off. "Relax." Then, to me, without looking up, "Dad, don't worry. Everything's under control." My voice came out low. Control of what he shrugged, eyes still on his phone. "I've got reasons for every charge." Don't stress. A dismissal disguised as reassurance. A door closed with a sentence. The card had barely lived in my wallet for months. Notifications from the bank had stopped. Not a glitch, just another quiet change I hadn't approved. That evening I went back to the garage, took screenshots of every questionable charge, saved login logs, wrote down unfamiliar IP addresses, deleted an automated payment Darren had set up months ago. The system confirmed the change with a soft ping. One clean cut in a mess I should have faced sooner. Inside the house, a package sat on the floor. Darren's name. My billing address. He appeared, grabbed the box without acknowledging me, and shut his door. Tape tore from inside the room. "Darren," I said. Silence. The house didn't feel tense. It felt rewritten around someone else's story. I stood in the kitchen staring at the remaining mail. Every envelope felt like a question waiting to expose a truth I already sensed. Sean's comment, the stranger's text, the charges. The easy way Darren assigned my name to his decisions. A new email from the bank arrived near the end of the workday. The subject line mentioned a risk review on my card because of unusual activity. Each one matched the pattern I'd already begun to trace. The bank wanted confirmation. They needed to know if I had approved the charges. Another alert. This time it showed a fresh charge at an electronics store downtown, several $100s. Darren's name flashed across my mind before I finished reading. A call to him connected after a few rings. "Did you use my card again?" The question came out steadier than I felt. A beat of silence, then. "Yeah, I needed something. Don't make it a big deal." He sounded annoyed, as if I were interrupting his day. That tone hit harder than the money. "You didn't ask," I said. "It's just a purchase," he replied. "Kon kan, bajung lam lon chuyan." The language switch came with that dismissive shrug he'd used so often growing up. It made me feel like a stubborn obstacle rather than the person paying his bills. Ending the call, I walked out to the garage with my phone still warm in my hand. The list of flagged charges stared back at me. The bank's fraud line answered after a few minutes on hold. "I need the card," halted. Temporary freeze. New verification code. And a printed statement for the past 6 months. The representative confirmed each request methodically. A small measure of control returned as every access point closed. When the call ended, a breath slipped out slowly. Evening settled in by the time I reheated leftovers. "What did you do?" he snapped. The noise around him told me he wasn't alone. Someone in the background laughed and said, "His dad cut him off." Darren hissed at them to stop, then returned louder. "My card got declined and I'm standing here like an idiot. Open it back up. It's my card," I said, "not yours." He exhaled sharply. "You're being dramatic." "Enough for today," I replied, ending the call. Another notification hit minutes later. The frozen card meant pending payments bounced back. My checking balance dipped lower than expected, and the mortgage was due in 2 days. One mistake, and fees would follow. People my age protect stability the way others guard their last good lung. Watching it wobble because of someone else's choices shook something deep. A coworker texted bank, asked me to verify a charge tied to your name. "Everything okay?" My vision blurred for a second. Whatever boundary I'd tried to put around the problem had split open. Darren's choices were leaking into my job, my reputation, the parts of my life I'd managed to keep steady. I walked back to the garage for air I could trust. The printer pushed out pages of transactions I'd never made. Seeing them on paper landed differently, undeniable physical reel. I arranged the papers in order. The pattern was impossible to miss. Darren wasn't overwhelmed. He wasn't cornered. He felt entitled. The card hadn't been a tool. It had been a pipeline. One he assumed I wouldn't dare shut down. Footsteps crossed the hallway. Darren's voice followed loud enough to cut through the garage door. Yeah, my dad's losing it, he told someone on the phone. He froze the account like it's some kind of punishment. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't hesitate. He framed me as unstable for doing the bare minimum to protect myself. The sting I expected didn't come. What landed instead was clarity, cold, steady overdue. I clipped the statements together. The weight felt out of proportion to what the pages actually were. Not money, not transactions. Years of shifting boundaries. Years of telling myself he'd grow up. Years of bending, hoping the next version of him would be better. Another email pinged. The bank needed verbal confirmation of the freeze. I typed a short reply and sat down on the metal folding chair beside the workbench. The garage offered the one kind of silence that didn't feel like surrender, just space. Enough space for a truth I'd been avoiding to finally solidify. This wasn't a rough patch. Not a misunderstanding. Not a temporary slide. The weekend brought no rest. The garage became the only space where I could think, so I set the laptop on the workbench and sorted through the statements again. The shock had faded. What replaced it was something colder, cleaner resolve. I called the bank. The rep walked me through the permanent card closure and issued a replacement. Your fraud alert is now set to maximum, Mr. Hale. Good, I said. Keep it that way. Screenshots followed dozens. I saved every login attempt from cities I hadn't visited, every automated change Darren had slipped past me, every withdrawal masked as something harmless. Years of being a quiet father made this kind of methodical work feel familiar. Infrastructure doesn't stay standing through hope. It stays standing through record-keeping. Another alert pinged, unusual login attempt blocked. Someone had tried to enter my email. I changed the password immediately. By mid-afternoon, I filled an external drive with everything, screenshots, PDFs, copied logs. Then drove downtown for stamped documents. The clerk printed the forms, pressed a blue seal on each page, and handed them over with a small nod. This will certify any claim you make, she said. Thank you. My voice felt steady, detached, like this was a necessary rebuild, not a meltdown. On the drive back to Selwood, the weight in the passenger seat wasn't paper. It was confirmation. The distance between Darren and me had been widening for years. Today it finally revealed its true size. At the house, the stamped statements joined the rest of the file on the workbench. Everything pointed in the same direction. No loopholes, no misunderstandings left to hide behind. The phone buzzed again, Darren's name flashing hard across the screen. Dad, pick up, he said in the last text. We need to talk. The vibration kept going until the battery warning blinked, then the screen went dark. Rain drifted across the driveway when I stepped back into the garage. The scent of damp pavement carried through the open door, but the space felt steadier than the rest of the house. The chair scraped faintly as I sat and opened the laptop. Lines of charges and timestamps filled the screen once more. Sorting through them no longer felt overwhelming. Patterns emerged cleanly. Darren's signature appeared everywhere except where it should have on a job application, on a bank account of his own, on any responsibility that belonged to him. Page by page, the truth sharpened. Calling the bank came next. The representative ran through the verification steps, then paused as she pulled up my file. Mr. Grant, I see repeated unauthorized activity. We can permanently close the compromised card and issue a new one immediately. Her voice carried a note of concern, without pity. That helped. Do it, I said. She processed the closure, issued a new card, reset every layer of security, and flagged the account for fraud monitoring at the highest level. The changes took minutes, but the shift inside me felt larger than any technical update. The call ended. Then came the photos. Screenshots of every charge. Copies of the login history. Emails Darren had deleted or rerouted. The folder thickened with digital proof as I transferred everything onto the external drive. Its weight felt symbolic when I snapped the case shut. I handled evidence the way someone preparing for a legal fight might, organized, deliberate, unsentimental. A notification pinged on my phone. "What are you doing?" The phrasing made my jaw clench. Someone close to Darren had written it. Someone he'd convinced that my taking control of my own finances was an attack on him. Another alert followed, this time from my email provider. Suspicious login attempt blocked. The message listed the attempted device type one I didn't recognize. Someone was testing my boundaries, not just financially now, but digitally. Then came a third text, this one from a friend of Darren's I barely remembered meeting. "He's under a lot of pressure. Don't make things harder." As if reclaiming what belonged to me was cruelty. As if Darren's comfort mattered more than the consequences that had landed on my shoulders. Those messages confirmed what I already sensed. Darren felt the shift. He'd relied on my hesitation for so long that any movement toward protecting myself triggered panic on his end. By late afternoon, the rain turned steady, streaking across the concrete as I backed the truck out. The drive downtown toward the U.S. Bank branch carried an unfamiliar calm. Not peace exactly, more like the acceptance that comes when a line finally holds firm. The lobby was nearly empty. A teller greeted me, and I explained what I needed: stamped certified statements for the past several months. She asked for ID, typed a few things into her screen, and returned with an envelope of neatly printed pages. The official stamp hit each sheet with a soft thud. That sound felt definitive. Leaving the branch, I pulled the collar of my jacket up against the drizzle and crossed the sidewalk toward the parking lot. The rain meant fewer pedestrians, fewer distractions. I preferred it that way. Halfway to the truck, my phone vibrated. Once, twice, then continuously. 5 missed calls blinked when I glanced at the screen. Darren again. No voicemail. Just repeated attempts to pull me back into the familiar cycle where he pressed, and I yielded. A deeper vibration buzzed against the fabric of my jacket. A 6th call. I tucked the phone into my pocket without answering. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Any conversation now would only be noise. The key fob clicked, unlocking the truck. I slid the envelope of stamped statements onto the passenger seat. The paper made a subtle rustle as it settled. Rain tapped along the hood as I started the engine. The phone buzzed again. And again. I let it ring out. The drive home cut through gray pavement and blinking lights, steady direct. Whatever waited ahead wasn't something silence could push away anymore. Back in the garage, I set the stamped envelope on the workbench. Another vibration hit the metal surface, Darren's name glowing once before fading. I didn't answer. I put the folder away and walked toward the house. A white envelope on the doormat stopped me cold. Bank logo. Urgent review. Inside a warning. My account was under formal investigation for repeated suspicious transactions. Potential impact on scheduled payments. The mortgage due in 2 days flickered through my mind like a hazard light. Then my work phone chimed a payroll delay notice. 24 hours. A small shift for most people. For me, after weeks of drained balances, it was enough to push everything into risk. A tight pulse beat at my throat. The margin for error was gone. Inside the kitchen, I set the bank letter down. Another buzz, a long text from Darren. Paragraphs accusing me of sabotage, resentment control. The opening line, "I can't believe you're doing this to your own son," read like a script designed to twist guilt into compliance. Not anger this time. just a colder clarity. A call from the bank broke through the room. "Mr. Grant, we need immediate verification on several charges. If we don't confirm today, the account may be marked negligent." Negligent. The word hit harder than anything Darren wrote. "I'll call back," I said. I pulled the external drive from the hall drawer. Everything I'd collected, the screenshots, timestamps, login attempts, certified statements, lay there like a blueprint of what I'd been refusing to name. Back in the kitchen, I called the bank again. Which transactions are unauthorized? All of them. My son Darren Grant made the charges. My voice held steady, like naming the truth had finally locked something into place. The rep guided me through the fraud process. When she asked if I wanted Darren permanently blocked from all linked accounts, the answer wasn't emotional. Yes. Fraud monitoring increased. Files documented. The call ended. Then the phone lit up. 6 calls. The 9th came with a voicemail. Against my better judgment, I listened. His voice burst through loud, frantic. "You ruined everything. I look like an idiot. You want to destroy my life. Fine, go ahead." Laughter in the background. A curse, a sharp clatter. The message cut off. I stacked the pages, slid them into the folder, and closed the metal clasp. A small click, but it landed like the end of something old. Another text flashed on the screen. "You'll regret this." Morning hadn't fully settled when I pulled into the U.S. Bank parking lot. The folder sat beside me, thick with the weeks I could no longer ignore. I carried it in without hesitation. A manager led me into her office. I laid the documents on her desk. She read the summaries carefully, then pushed a stack of forms toward me. "This first one removes all third-party permissions," she said. "Linked cards, transfers, shared access, everything." "Good," I answered. My signature moved across the line with the steadiness of someone finally done apologizing. More forms followed: the fraud report, the identity protection request, a statement naming Darren as the source of the unauthorized activity. With each signature, something old and heavy loosened. Years of guilt tied to losing his mother. Years of telling myself that stepping aside was the same as caring. Years of believing sacrifice would keep the bond intact. The truth landed hard: love needs boundaries. What I'd been doing wasn't love, it was surrender. The manager gathered the forms and nodded. "We'll move fast on this, Mr. Grant." "Thank you," I said, though gratitude wasn't the feeling. It was closure. Outside, my phone buzzed again, Darren's name, then another unknown number. "He's freaking out. They won't let him buy anything. He said you ruined his credit." "What happened? Deleted. All of them." Driving through Selwood, I felt something unclench. Not relief, just space. Enough to pull into a diner and sit in a booth without scanning the door for another problem. "How's your day going?" the waitress asked. "Productive," I said. The word fit. Productivity isn't only about building something. Sometimes it means reclaiming what shouldn't have been taken. I paid with the new card, clean, uncompromised, and stepped back into the street. The world moved as if nothing dramatic had happened. In a way, that steadiness was its own kind of mercy. Over the next weeks, life shifted back into a rhythm I recognized. The nonprofit needed part-time tech help, and I settled into a schedule that didn't drain me. The work was simple, precise, and honest. Pipes, valves, filtration units, problems that responded to actual fixable steps, not emotional negotiation. Bills balanced, savings inched upward again. The dishwasher broke. I repaired it without worrying if I'd overdraw the account. Small wins, yes, but wins that belonged to me. I cleared out old furniture and belongings I'd kept only because I thought they held the family together. They didn't. I kept what I used, what I liked, nothing else. When spring came, my lease ended. I moved into a modest apartment near the Willamette Quiet Functional Mine. Evenings stretched calmly, a meal on the stove, a book, the river trail when the light turned soft. Life didn't feel empty. It felt accurate. Darren tried contacting me a few times. Brief attempts, then nothing when he realized the access was gone for good. His debts followed him now. His friends stopped taking his side once they heard the real story. He would have to figure things out on his own. That wasn't punishment. It was adulthood. One late afternoon, I stood in my new place and slipped the final printed statement, clean, simple, untouched by anyone but me, into the front of the folder. The file cabinet drawer closed with a soft, decisive click. No grand revelation followed, no dramatic swell, just a steady truth settling where chaos used to sit.